All right, so I'm trying to keep it snappy. Hear that? Snappy, snappy. So we continue our look at the social, political, and economic obstacles that the Weimar Republic faced. This is part two. Keeping in mind the learning outcomes that we discussed, or you didn't discuss a thing, from part one. All right, so here is when it starts getting kind of ugly with the Kapp Putsch and the Ruhr Uprising in 1920. March of 1920. So basically, what we have is an attempted coup by Wolfgang Kapp, and he attempts to set up a military dictatorship. And essentially, and they occupy Berlin. And things get so bad that the government actually has to flee. And so this push is happening as a response to the government trying to disband the Freikorps. So the Allied powers basically said having lot of people running around with guns, being paramilitary, not so good because it's still basically military. And so the government tries to disband. They reject this, and and they have basically no options, right? And so this is a symptom of the wider dissatisfaction that happens from the from the right. And they received a lot of support from a number of rightist groups, most especially from the military. So the government calls in the military to try to push down this Wolfgang Kapp thing, and the military is like, no. As a matter of fact, they receive support from the military, and like this government that they set up was accepted and recognized by a number of the people high up in the military. So, ooh, things ain't looking so good. They're just not. All right. So basically, the army refuses to get involved, and this Kapp Putsch is going on. Berlin is in chaos, and the only people who actually step up to try to stop this are the workers, people on the left. And so the workers call for a general strike, and thereby preventing the Kapp Putsch people in Berlin from being able to have access to the railroads. And and so and that way they can't spread outside of Berlin, and they also have limited access to media. Once this has happened, that the workers have taken control of the media and the train type things, now this actually sparks off a revolt in the Ruhr region, again on the left, and this is called the Ruhr Uprising. And so basically, they're trying to take control at the local level. And then the other thing is they're also thinking that this is their historic moment, right? Because Germany herself, the country was created when, out of violence, when Prussia essentially forces the other states to join up. And so, and so one of the things that here is that there's this current of regionalism, right? So they're basically saying that they're part of this government that they never really wanted to be part of. So in a way, it's kind of separatist. They're not terribly interested in taking over the whole of Germany, but it's kind of maybe restoring their region back to the autonomy that it had. Now, of course, the military is like, oh, no. Now that these people on the left are all trying to take things over, we are not going to let this happen. But in German. And so they go and they put down the Kapp Putsch. And now that they've put that down, then they let the government return to Berlin. And then they basically have to ask the government has to ask the military to go and put down these leftist groups, right? So they thought that if the government came back, if the Weimar government and the Social Democratic Party came back, then the leftist groups would simmer down, and you would have this settling of the situation. But the leftist groups were like, they got a little taste of freedom, and they were like, we are not coming back, bye bye. And so now they have to ask the military to put down the leftist revolts, and the army goes at it hard, which is why you see this wonderful portrait that these soldiers are taking, all proud like, with the people they just done went and killed. And basically, more unrest is only to follow from 1920, 1922. We have what is called the White Terror. And so White Terror, usually the word white is used to denote people on the right. And Red Terror, you know how this goes. And so basically, we're talking about 400 political members. And so these are mostly said to be done by the Freikorps. But keep in mind, hopefully you remember, that there were many Freikorps groups, and each group had its own paramilitary and basically its own organizational and leadership structure. And so we have assassinations of leader of the Center Party as well as the foreign minister. And both of these assassinations could be connected to all of the stuff that happened in Versailles, right? So this is anti-Versailles. And so the Saudi Party leader helped to negotiate the armistice. So he had a target on his back from the beginning. And then the foreign minister is the one who's involved with these in negotiating with foreign governments. And basically he is kind of implementing the Versailles Treaty and accepting it. And so these are all part of the quote-unquote November criminals. So all of those people, the idea of November criminals will come up later as part of the Nazi rhetoric. Which brings us to the Beerhall Putsch, right? And this is November 1923. And this is when Hitler basically starts coming out on a larger stage. And so the Nazis and Hitler try to mount a revolution, overthrow the Weimar Republic, take over Bavaria. And this is all really kind of hasty, like it wasn't planned at all. And this is inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, where, for those of you who didn't do this, it's the whole idea, part of the propaganda that Mussolini put out there, that basically the fascists, the black shirts, and they marched to Rome and they forced the king to give Mussolini control of the government. And so they were attempting to do something similar. And in a very real way, the Beerhall Putsch is a culmination of the rightist pressure on the state. And this is also part of the White Terror that we just spoke about. And essentially, 2,000 people try, it starts in a beer hall, so, hey, it's like, people having a little too much fun, and then they were like, hey, we should take over the government. And then he was like, oh my God, we should totally try to take over the government. So 2,000 of them try to march to Munich to seize control. And the police are like, slow your roll. And they open fire on them. 16 people are killed. People are like, oh my gosh. And they try to run in all of these different directions and hide and stuff. But a number of them are arrested, including Hitler. And so, as you can see in that image, this is them at their trial. And you can see that they're all wearing sort of like the whole military outfit and everything, right? And so all of these guys were given very lenient sentences. This is basically treason, right? Trying to overthrow the government. But these guys were given super lenient sentences. Like Hitler was out in like 8-9 months, and he served 8-9 months out of his 5-year sentence. And so this kind of indicates that the judiciary is sympathetic to these ideas that these guys are putting forth. And so it kind of is another indication of some of the stuff that the Weimar Republic would have to try to overcome in order to be successful. And so we kind of have to consider the legitimacy of the government. Now, this is something that we've spoken about numerous times in the past about government legitimacy, and how that contributes to their ability to stay in power. So overall, this political violence undermined trust in this democratic state. And it also undermined trust in the people running the government. People are thinking, man, things were better when we had an autocratic government that took care of everything. We have street fights between paramilitary groups, so different free court groups against others. We have these rightist groups fighting the leftist group. There are murders of various leaders and various elites. And every group, almost every group that we're talking about here, has their own private army, which basically means, you ain't safe out there, girl. You ain't safe. All right. So essentially what we're saying here is we have democracy in law, but not in spirit. So we have a constitution. We have the trappings of democracy. However, you have the old elites still in positions of power, and they do not like these newfangled democratic ideas, and they have very little enthusiasm for the republic. Thereby not really doing a good job making sure it's successful. The judiciary also came from the elite, and so they were more harsh on the people who they disagreed with than on the other side, like we can see with the lenient sentences for the Beerhall Putsch. The civil service, same. All right. And so essentially what they were using is the power that they had, right? Because the civil service essentially implements what the government says needs to be done. And so they were like, they were stamping real slow in order to delay the reforms that were coming down the pipeline. And then we have the military officers who are also elites, right? Largely aristocracy. And so they didn't accept the surrender. They didn't accept the Treaty of Versailles. And of course, they preferred the system that came before, when, they were in good positions of power. And basically, the world worked the way that they wanted it to. All right, so y'all know I like to talk a lot. So, problems. So this is to be continued. Yay! Where we'll look at the economic factors.